The following content is for information and entertainment purposes only. The opinions expressed in this episode are those of the participants and do not represent the views of any third-party entities. Hi, and welcome to the second Flexibility Focus Minisode, a companion show to the main podcast, which features the best and brightest minds of the health and fitness industry. Although flexibility is the main theme of the show, my guests and I talk about other important issues which you will find beneficial. In this episode, I interview Brad Georgiev, a sports therapist and injury rehabilitation expert who is also helping other exercise and therapy business owners to achieve more engagement and success through his mentoring services. Brad and I talk about the state of the health and fitness industry, and we cover some of the more controversial topics like, is there such a thing as good or bad posture? Is manual therapy effective? And so on. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I enjoyed making it. As always, please show your support by liking and subscribing wherever you are, and by sharing the show with your friends. Enjoy. So, I guess we begin by asking you to tell the audience about yourself and how you got involved in the health and fitness industry.
Yep. Well, it was kind of an accident, to be honest. When I was like about 19, I was in uni and I was doing a degree that I didn't really know what was basically about, like most 19-year-olds.
Yeah.
It was called Sports and Leisure Management. So I guess it was just kind of teaching me on how to manage a leisure center, which it wasn't really my goal in life. I just didn't really know what I want to do with my life. So I was looking for work and I came across kind of something called Active Health Group. At the time, I had no idea that these guys were doing like sports therapy training. I just went there for the job. Initially, they declined me the job because they were looking for a receptionist. I was pretty bad at speaking the language at the time, but they offered me like a general kind of help around job. And then like after a couple of weeks working for them, I kind of got into what they were doing, and like the owner showed me a couple of things, and then I realized I was actually in a place that people were being treated for pain. And then little by little, I started to kind of get involved in class. And that's how I accidentally stumbled upon sports therapy.
Yeah.
I was really young, basically.
So for the people who are listening, some may have an idea what sports therapy is, but can you just explain, I suppose, the main difference between sports therapy and what people might assume as physiotherapy, in your opinion?
Well, the main difference has always been the fact that personally for me, the way we've been trained, obviously, like I think everything goes down to the way the person or the therapist has been trained. And I think the training that I received initially was very much hands-on. So the approach was like, get the clients in, assess them with as many techniques as possible, and then get your hands on the clients, just so you can start working on them. Whereas, like from what I've seen working with different physios, that's not really something that they focus on. And in a way, they kind of skip certain things that for us will be quite important, like the hands-on work. So that's the main difference. But it all depends on how the person sees like the industry. Like some people like to do one thing, others like to do other. I prefer to do like things combined, just like you do.
Yeah, more of a holistic approach.
Yeah, exactly.
So for the people who are listening and aren't aware, I trained as a sports therapist as well with Active Health Group, and Brad was actually one of my tutors. So I can speak for his quality as a therapist and as a coach. And we're going to talk about the whole manual therapy doesn't work debate in a little bit later on in the show. But Brad, can you just tell us some of the main services and treatments that you offer?
So the main treatments that I personally do are mainly treatments related to like fixing pain, working with people's postures, so improving posture, and then just looking at the way that people move. The main reason why people come to me is because they've got some sort of an injury that's been bugging them for a long time. Most of the time I get people that have been everywhere, so people can't really understand why they're having the pain. And those are the cases that I really enjoy working with, because it's like a mystery, Sometimes I feel like a detective. So the body will give you clues, so you have to kind of, have him like in front of you, so you can think like, why is this being caused? What's causing it? So where does that lead to and stuff? So like the treatments I offer are mainly like hands-on treatments for like working with pain, recovering from injury, and then just going back to optimal movement. and
Yes.
posture.
Yeah, yeah, brilliant. And so, what are some of your special interests? Because I know there's a lot of different divisions. You've got pain science, neurology, proprioception, exercise rehab.
Yeah.
What are kind of your special interest areas?
Personally, for me, it's something that has really fascinated me over the years, ever since I stumbled upon it. And that's something that you just mentioned. That's proprioception.
Mm.
Even now, I'm kind of listening to an audiobook. It's about like different philosophical approaches, but like proprioception kind of comes up in between here and there, because there's a big connection between proprioception and neurology, and obviously the way we move, flexibility, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And ever since I came across the term proprioception, I've kind of it keeps popping up everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that we do as a therapist or as a health practitioner, there will be some sort of a proprioceptional approach.
Mm-hmm.
Like there will be some sort of a role that proprioception plays in whatever segments of the industry we work in. Like maybe you work with pain. Pain is something caused by proprioception.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you don't have the signals that tell your brain that there's something going wrong with the body, then that's all proprioception. So
Yeah.
that's my biggest interest. And then the second thing I'm really interested in is neurology, so the function of nerves. The way I see it, like if you imagine the muscles, they're basically bags of meat, fascia and tissue, and then these pieces of tissue are basically being controlled by nerves. Without the nerves, then there will be no movement.
Yeah, that's a good analogy actually. I remember when we were when I was doing my training with you, and you used the tree analogy for the nerves.
Yeah, upside down.
Can you just explain a little bit about that analogy, just to the audience?
Well, like if you think about it, so obviously we got the brain, and the brain is essentially like where everything begins from. So the brain is you got the cranial nerves that start off from the brainstem and different segments of the brain itself, and then from these cranial nerves, which will then connect into the spinal cord. So the way I see it, the cranial nerves are the roots of the body, where all the information, all the nutrients, everything begins from. And then the spinal cord is basically the body of the tree, which like it kind of controls the other branches that will come out of it. So like the sciatic nerve, the femoral nerve, all of those nerves are basically branches of the spinal cord. And then if you flip the body upside down, it resembles a tree. The roots are in the brain, which is the soil where everything comes out of. The spinal cord is the body, and then everything just branches out into smaller and smaller and smaller branches until you reach the tips of the fingers and the toes and the skin. So that's kind of how I see the body,
Yeah, and I know from like my classmates, we certainly found that a useful analogy to kind of envision the
it's
the
just good
nervous
to,
system.
like, if you imagine, like, obviously in colors, like you've got the body, you've got all these yellow kind of sparks of like movement, and then if you look at if you take out the nerves, obviously, like I've got a couple of apps on my laptop, like anatomy apps, and if you take out the nerves, and if you look at the way the nerves, they resemble like tree branches, literally resemble tree branches.
Yeah. There's actually an image, and I think it was from a cadaver where they had just the brain and the nervous system, and it literally looked like the roots of the branches and roots of a tree.
That's where I got the idea from.
Okay.
I saw this image, and then I flip it upside down. I'm like, this looks like a tree.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a funny shape, but if you think about it, it's like, it actually
Yeah.
resembles a tree.
Absolutely. I mean, that could lead us down a rabbit hole of all kinds of philosophical and metaphysical arguments about, the links between trees and how the human body is designed, but we'll leave that for another time.
Different podcast.
Yeah. So what are some of the more common issues that you find in people who come to you for treatment, and what are kind of some of the strategies that you used to help them?
Well, to be honest, like over the last, I don't know, like 6 years, I've seen like a variety of issues, from back pain, hip pain, knee, head and neck, feet. Like I've probably treated everything there is to treat when it comes to the exterior portion of the body. There isn't a muscle really in the body. Like obviously there's muscles in the body that can't really be reached, in the treatment room. But like, of the most common injuries that occur to a person, I've treated the majority of these. The most common thing I would probably say is people experiencing pain due to poor movement, or poor posture. Those two things will essentially lead to pain down the line, regardless of what some people think or say. Those two are vital for, like, having a good quality of movement and a pain-free life, basically. So that's the main thing that I work with.
Yeah. Yeah, and you touch on an important point, and we'll talk about posture in a bit. But there's obviously this theme going around in the industry at the moment that there's no such thing as bad posture.
Yeah,
But I mean, my background is biomechanics, which is the study of forces in the human tissues and in the human body, and forces affect how that structure is going to support itself and how it's going to move. So it's really quite obvious, especially people who work in the industry, like therapists like yourself.
yeah,
It's obvious that posture is an issue and that movement habits are an issue. But we'll talk about that in a second.
yeah,
Um, so you put a lot of great content on your account, especially the resistance training where you're challenging stability, such as using a resistance band wrapped around the legs when people are doing deadlifts and single leg squats. For members of the audience who might not be familiar with that type of treatment or training, can you just tell them some of the benefits of doing that?
yeah. The way I see it, it's like obviously people are quite adapted to their bodies because we kind of live with them every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then whenever someone comes to the clinic, I always try and kind of try and find the weak points in their body, because most of the time these people won't even know where the weak point is. I'll give you an example. Is with one of my clients. So he's a bodybuilder. He's got like a really high deadlift, squats, whatever. He's a really strong guy. And then I got him to do a single-sided deadlift. So if you imagine the bar, normally people would have like weights on both sides of the bar.
Mm-hmm.
I took the weights from one side, so he actually had a 10 kg plate on the left hand side.
Yeah.
I told him, like, imagine this is a normal deadlift, so I want you to just go up into as you would with your 200 kilos normally,
Mm-hmm.
but this time you've only got 10 kg on one side.
Yeah.
He went up and he straight away went to one side.
Wow.
So this is a guy who like lifts heavy weights on a day-to-day basis, and
Yeah.
there he is with a 10 kg plates, crying like a baby because he's not able to stabilize his body and stand up.
Yeah.
So this is how like stability plays a massive role in like weight training, walking, running, and any sport you can think of.
Mm-hmm.
Like such a small difference. All I've taken away is 10 kg.
Yeah.
Think about it. Like you're someone who just deadlifts like 200 kilos,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden like I'm shifting this weight to one side, and it's only like 2% of that weight or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
Absolutely.
you can't do that.
Yeah.
So why can't you do that? Well, the first reason that he couldn't do it is because he's not adapted to it. So he never does that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
After like maybe 10 or 15 reps, he was actually doing it really good because he's got the mind muscle connection.
Yeah.
And that's how quickly it takes the brain to adapt to a new movement, right? This is something completely new for him.
Yeah.
Something that he wouldn't even think about doing on his in his normal training regime.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I
That's
think
why
that.
I love, go on.
Yeah. No. Like you can carry on. Sorry.
I just want to say that's why I love finding. So whenever I find something like this, it kind of gives me goosebumps.
Yeah.
It's weird, but it's like discovering things about the body, and
Mm-hmm.
it could be so subtle that like a 10 kg change in the exercise can make a massive difference.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a great example that illustrates the principles of specificity and
Yeah,
adaptation,
yeah, yeah,
because for people who are listening or watching who aren't familiar, there are certain sports training principles, essentially laws that apply across the full spectrum of physical training and movement. And they essentially say that you adapt specifically to the demands that are placed on the body. So like you said, you've got your bodybuilder who's got like a monster of a deadlift at 200 kilos, which is, for the Americans who are listening, that's 400 plus pounds. But yet you give him just 10 kilos on one side of the bar and he's wobbling all over the place.
yeah,
And it's important that people, although it's great to work on the traditional squat, the traditional deadlift, to develop that strength and resilience, you also need to move out of those kind of formalized traditional movement patterns, because that's not how you move in daily life.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I think that's great.
The way I see it, it's like it's external forces that the person is just not like adapted to. You mentioned about resistance bands, and this is where a band plays an amazing kind of part in exercise. Like even I don't know, like a couple of pounds in terms of resistance,
Mm-hmm.
or a couple of kilos in resistance coming from a very small band can cause a massive disturbance in the entire body,
Mm-hmm.
simply because you're not used to it. That's one of the key kind of ways that I treat knee injuries, ligaments damage, injuries, football injuries, rugby, whatever. Once you've had a ligaments injury in the knee, then your knee will never well, I say never, but most of the time it won't really be as stable as it was before.
Yeah.
So it's just about finding which angle of movement is not stable, and then just challenging that with a band.
Mm-hmm.
Simply
Yeah, yeah.
standing on one leg and having the band pulling the knee in a direction. That's it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. In fact, I can attest to that because when I was going through my training with you, if you remember when we were doing the proprioception test, I had the wobbly ankle, which
Yeah,
was
yeah,
caused by a lateral ankle ligament rupture, essentially from training. Um, and the thing that fixed it was doing movements on that leg with a
yeah,
band wrapped around the leg to destabilize the movement pattern, basically. And the
yeah.
ankle's great now, you know?
That's how easy it is most of the time. And
Yeah,
then like once you've done that, obviously with body weight, then you can just apply it to any exercise. Like you said, a deadlift with a band pulling your rib cage to one direction whilst you having to stabilize that with your core and with your QL, your glute medius muscles.
yeah, yeah.
It's just crazy what you can do with like a band in the gym.
Absolutely. And it touches on another important principle which people kind of move away from, I think, as they try to increase engagement on social media. And it's the principle of moving from simple exercises to more complex exercises
Yeah,
or movements. And so you see people there's some people out there and they're doing, single leg burpees, squats on a Bosu ball with a blindfold or something crazy, insert crazy exercise here, but really all you need to do is add a little, a touch of simplicity to the exercise, and it can do wonders.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah, definitely. That's how
and
it works. So
yeah, absolutely. So on to one of the more controversial topics in the industry. What are your thoughts on the manual therapy doesn't work debate?
um like obviously you and I've talked about this before, and
Mhm.
we've seen different. I follow people on social media that don't really agree with this stuff, and then I see them quarreling with other people that agree with it. And
Mhm.
most of the time, I try and stay away from that
Yeah,
because, like, I've seen results with my practice over the last 6 years. There's no one that can come here, present me a research, and say to me like, what you've done for the last 6 years doesn't work.
Mhm.
Because I've seen like my clients successfully being treated for pain, poor posture and movement and stuff. So I don't know. I think sometimes people are just looking for engagement, like you
Mhm.
said yourself. So they're looking for some sort of a way to hook onto someone else,
Yeah,
and maybe get some more clients out of that, or maybe try and undermine other people.
yeah,
I've never felt the need to undermine people in the industry. I want people to try and express themselves in their own way.
yeah,
I've got my own ways. I've had people that don't agree with them in the past.
yeah.
On Facebook, for example, when I post something, I get a comment.
Mhm.
And the easiest way to deal with that, like if I get a comment of someone saying like, here's a piece of research that says that what you've just shown is not correct, I'll just find the piece of research that says that what I'm doing is correct, and I'll
Exactly.
just send it to them. Because
Right, right.
you know
Yeah,
yourself that like you've read a lot more research than I have, and you know yourself that there's like so much controversy even in research.
yeah, yeah,
um so there's nothing that like there's nothing definite or certain. Like
yeah.
there's research saying that manual therapy doesn't work, and then there's going to be a paper saying that it does work. Like which one do I believe?
Right, right.
I'm just going to believe my experience.
Yeah, and you touched on an important point which I made in episode 2 of the main podcast, which was that there's a lot of bad science out there,
Yeah,
and there's a huge disconnect between the good science and what's going on in the industry. Because, like you say, people are cherry picking a
yeah,
handful of flawed research articles and then
yeah,
using that to support their confirmation bias, which is it's
yeah.
ridiculous. You
Well,
know.
yeah, yeah. This is where we need to mention, obviously, like the fact that, like you said, that there are techniques out there that can be dangerous for the body.
Hmm.
And this is where like maybe sometimes I will probably say something like I can mention the Chinese scraping technique, like the gua sha
Yeah.
way of treating the body, and like that is scientifically harmful
Hmm.
because you are killing tissue basically. And whenever we've got something as obvious as that, you know,
Yeah.
then I'm happy to comment on that and say that it's not great.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, there are some questionable techniques out there, and I think we choose to support what you
Yeah,
know conforms to our biases at the end of the day and our opinions. I think when it comes to manual therapy specifically,
yeah,
uh, my opinion is that people who say it doesn't work full stop haven't read enough of the research, because manual therapy and static stretching as well, they're
yeah,
the two of the most researched interventions
yeah,
in healthcare and medicine, and
yeah,
the number of good studies saying that they show a positive benefit or a positive effect far outweigh the studies saying that there isn't. And what you'll tend to get is you have that the hierarchy of evidence where systematic reviews and meta-analyses sit at the top. And you'll get people saying, well, I've got the systematic review which looked at 9 articles and they showed that there's no positive effect. Therefore, because it's a systematic review, the treatment doesn't work. And it's like, well, hang on a second. If you dive into that systematic review, the studies that they looked at weren't great quality. So if a systematic review reviews poor quality, it's like that old saying, garbage in, garbage out. So if the studies themselves are weak, the systematic review itself is going to be weak.
Yeah,
And I think that for me is a massive issue. There's just not enough literacy when it comes to reading and applying the research. And this, we're talking about often people who've got, postgraduate qualifications like master's degrees and doctorates who are saying science, there's this. It's like, well, actually, if you read enough of the research, you'll find that you're slightly off center here. But like you say, ultimately as well, the results of a study are specific to the context of the study. So if you've got a study which shows that acupuncture, the big controversial one, if that doesn't work in hamstring rehabilitation for 15-year-old soccer players, that doesn't mean you can apply that then to a quadriceps tear or a ligament strain on a 50-year-old man who's never played soccer in his life. So
I think the other reason why people kind of neglect or maybe dismiss manual therapy is because they haven't tried it, or they've tried it and it's not really been successful for them. It's like either they haven't read enough to be able to support what they're doing, or they've tried it and it's not really gone the way they expected it to go.
Exactly.
The thing with manual therapy is that it takes time and it's not for everyone. Just like flexibility training is not going to be everyone's way of treating people, or proprioception training or neurology. That's why people have their own interests, and everyone has a different approach. And there's absolutely no point in people dismissing something completely and saying that it doesn't work. Because essentially the optimal is the fool in the end. If that thing works, So.
And I think that takes us nicely into the next question: is what are your thoughts on there's no such thing as bad posture debate?
It's like, would you say that there's no such thing as a bad exercise or as a good exercise? Because essentially there isn't. So the way I look at posture and exercise as well, but I'll mention that in a second. The way I look at posture is how optimal is your posture. It's not about bad or good here. Like we said, if I'm an architect and I'm designing a building, I want to make sure this building is stable, because if it's not stable, it's going to kill people. Or if you look at the body the same way, like we design our own posture based on our lifestyle and based on our choices when it comes to like the way we sit, the way we stand, how aware we are of our body. And the more aware you are, the better your posture is going to be in terms of like transferring loads, the way everything's positioned, like the shoulders, the head, like you said yourself, like there's so many forces going through the body. If you're not optimal to handle all this loads, then that's going to result in pain.
Yeah.
This pain probably resulted from the fact that your posture is not optimal.
Yeah.
Or is bad.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Maybe bad wasn't the right word, but I think that's what a lot of people think is they think posture is just this. It's just the way somebody is, and they don't think about maybe the causative factors that have made that person assume that posture. Whether it's physical injury or emotional injury, the body's going to represent that trauma and those forces essentially acting on the body, and it's going to carry itself in a certain way. And if it's carrying itself in a certain, again, it comes down to simple forces for me. If a body's not carrying their structure in a way that can support those forces optimally, at some point those structures are going to give way. Like you say, it's like a building, really.
Yeah, exactly. Like the foundation, if the foundation isn't stable enough, this is where we say stable rather than strong, because obviously strength is a different segments of posture and movement, right?
Yeah.
And this is where core stability comes in, and a lot of people are against core stability, and but the reason why they're against it is because like there's this thing in like I'm reading this book at the moment about philosophy, and they say about the way that people see things, like and maybe comprehend things. Like obviously you and I comprehend things very similarly, because whenever you say core stability, I start thinking like, which muscles are you talking about? What is that stability referring to? Lumbar stability, pelvic SI joints, blah blah blah. Whenever, or if someone else, if I say core stability to like someone that doesn't really agree with it, all they see is just the abdominal kind of section of the body. It's like they don't really see beyond that point. It's like
Right.
looking through a keyhole and they go like, oh, core stability, it's shit, it doesn't really do much because it's like there,
Yeah.
and it's just the way you comprehend things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So people just need to like listen to, like, whenever you hear core stability, just hold on a second, don't start hating it straight away, and just think like, what does it mean, when I say core stability, or what do you mean when you say core stability, because we might have different approaches,
Mm.
just
Yeah.
how to comprehend it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think people's definitions depends on kind of what lens that they're looking through. Because somebody who's looking through stability or posture through the lens of pain science
Yeah.
will be different to somebody who's looking through the lens of biological physics and forces, or somebody who's looking through the lens of performance. So that's something we need to, again, context,
Yeah, exactly.
you know,
I mean, posture doesn't really just go for like a person standing in complete like in a neutral posture or anatomical zero. Posture goes for the way your body is when you take a step forward, right? Or the way you are when you're sitting, or the way you are when you're running. That's all posture.
right.
It's just posture put into a different context or a different movement and activity. It's not just about standing there and, oh yeah, so you got one shoulder elevated. What does that tell you? Nothing much.
Yeah.
So it's just different, like I said, context.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's good. What do you think are some of the issues with the current standard of therapy and exercise education, and is there a particular direction you'd like to see it go in?
I personally I do my own courses, and like in my courses, I kind of focus on things that I've learned in the past and things that I believe in, and things that obviously I've tried and I've had success with. I guess I don't really tend to follow a lot of the education as much, because things, how can I say this? There's advanced education, there's kind of foundational education. When it comes to foundational education, everything is the same.
Yeah.
When it comes to advanced education, that's where people like tend to kind of go off into their own kind of ways of understanding like the body,
Yeah.
you know. So there's not really much I can say, because like if someone has success with a treatment modality, then they're worth listening to. It's as simple as that. If something is dangerous, or if something is not backed up by science sufficiently,
Mm-hmm.
then obviously people need to kind of do their research before they go into a course. It's as simple as that. But the issue is that people don't really research before they go into a course. They just kind of, they see something attractive and they sign up to it. So just make sure you do your research before you sign up to a course, and just make sure you understand what the person is kind of saying, and you've seen their success with clients and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great one, especially when it comes to clients as well, because I've said this in the past when it comes to flexibility.
Yeah.
You'll see a lot of copy and pasted courses where it's a person who is naturally flexible, and say they trained as a gymnast as a kid, or that they just have a natural genetic propensity for a large range of motion in the joints, and they'll say, "This is what I do to stretch every day. Do it, and you'll get the same level of flexibility." It's like, well, you're talking absolute horseradish there, because somebody who doesn't have the same genetic propensity for flexibility is not going to get the same results, and it's a bit disingenuous in my opinion. But I think the strategy you suggested, where people just dig a little deeper before they throw the cash at someone, it's going to save a lot of heartache and frustration in the long term, and look for those customer testimonials.
Exactly. Or maybe even look through like the videos of people actually performing these techniques, and just make sure you understand what that is. And like you said yourself, I used to do PT, and obviously I still do like rehab PT. But when I was in like the fitness industry, like there will be a lot of people promoting themselves that they've achieved a certain body appearance by following a program which they designed. Now, like you said yourself, like someone might get jacked by doing 10 push-ups a day, whereas someone else might need like to eat 1,000 calories per day plus a rigorous program of doing exercise every day in order to get the same result.
Yeah.
So like it's the same with flexibility or mobility or stability, whatever. Some people are just better at certain segments of movement, right?
Right. Exactly.
It's not about being better than other people. It's just about being able to like teach it to others.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. Like some of the best football players in the world make shitty coaches because they don't really understand the game.
Yeah.
It's the same with what you do and what I do.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's a good answer. I mean, speaking of kind of the stuff that people are posting on social media, we see a lot of people putting out what I would describe as quite silly, and we've said that there's no such thing really as a bad exercise, but there are some, I think, which are just daft because they don't produce the results people are saying, and they are potentially dangerous, especially for people who are unfit and watch and think, oh, I'm going to give that a try. Or they just give out advice which doesn't match what science and basic physiology says, and people can potentially get hurt. And I know if you or I did that in practice, we'd be struck off, or there'd at least some kind of consequences. Do you think that there needs to be some kind of regulation so that people like that should be held accountable for their actions or what they say on social media?
Yeah, I think I just need to expand on the bad exercise theory, just so that people understand like what that means. Like you said yourself, there's dangerous exercise that nobody should be doing, something that actually endangers your health, that you can get injured by. Like if someone says to me like, is deadlifting a bad exercise? I would say to them that it could be, depending on the way you do it. So like take any exercise in the gym. A bicep curl could be a bad exercise, a crunch, whatever. It all depends on the way it's been executed. So exercise execution is what determines whether an exercise is going to be bad or good, basically. So every exercise can be good if you do it the right way. Obviously we're gonna take this away from the exercises that are dangerous, like standing on a balls to ball, single leg standing on the balls to ball, stuff like that. This is probably an exercise that a really like advanced gymnast does every day and stuff. Doesn't mean that you and I will be able to. You probably can do it, but most people won't be able to do that stuff. So this is kind of not really. There's no backup for this. What's the point of this exercise? But as long as someone can explain to me like why they're doing a certain exercise, I'm willing to kind of think like, okay, there might be something there. But if there's people like on social media, like you said, on social media, people kind of promoting loads of different things, that's the issue with social media. That's why I hate it. It's because like, for example, a couple of weeks ago, I was trying to post something. And then it was me doing a treatment on like someone, and she was wearing a sports bra and some shorts. Facebook banned this video because it was showing too much flesh. And at the same time, you get guys like, certain accounts on Instagram and stuff, showing like a fully exposed glute, with a girl wearing a thong or something. And that stuff goes. So those are the things that should be kind of banned when it comes to social media. But the issue is that social media is just too free. Everyone can post whatever they want, and that's the problem. There's nothing that can stop that.
Yeah, I agree. It's
just too much shit, kind of mixed with too much good stuff.
Yeah, there's no bullshit filter basically, and that's the problem.
Yeah. There's not much you can do about that.
Yeah, and I think the way the public's going is because they utilize social media so much, they put faith in the quality of the stuff that they're seeing. I'm not trying to insult anybody when I say this, but it seems like a lot of people lose their ability to think rationally when they see an attractive person doing an attractive movement. I mean, we had the whole issue quite recently with the whole skinny coffee debacle, which was there's a guy called James Smith who spoke out quite strongly against it, and I think they even tried to sue him a few times. He got thrown out of court. And if you're listening and you're drinking skinny coffee, throw that shit down the sink. But these people, they continue selling this product which physiologically doesn't work, and there's no repercussions.
But that's the main problem of Instagram, right? So like you get someone who has a really good appearance, they're jacked, or if it's a girl, they have certain attributes and stuff. So and obviously they will gain like a lot of followers, and then a lot of these people will follow them because of this. And then someone new comes onto their profile, and then they see like 50,000 followers, 100,000 followers, and they go like, this guy or girl knows what they're talking about.
Right.
Most of the fitness profiles that I've come across with that many followers have no clue about either anatomy, physiology, neither of these things that we've just been talking about. And they're giving out tips and tricks on how to move better. And I recently saw an ad on Instagram about a London kind of physio company and stuff, and that's exactly what I've just said. That's what they were doing. They put someone like onto the ad that was obviously good looking. They had loads of followers, and people were like, oh yeah, so I'm gonna believe what he says, even though what he's doing is just bullshit.
I mean, at the end of the day, people can follow who they want and listen to who they want, and people are free to put out, I think good content, but I think there's a line which people shouldn't be crossing, and that's where
Yeah,
it just becomes like disingenuous and
yeah,
risky people's health. So that was a
yeah,
good answer. So I know, and I think other people who work with you know that you provide great coaching when it comes to running a successful social media account. And I know that when I attended your seminar, kind of my engagement really took off. And it's not about becoming popular or making money or anything like that. It's just about getting good info out to more people. So if you could give one piece of advice to people who are struggling to put out content or to increase engagement, what would that piece of advice be?
yeah. So when it comes to putting out content, people will probably take that. This will take you the most time to actually understand what type of content you want to put on. You've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing it for a long time. And then after a lot of unsuccessful attempts at content, I finally kind of found out what type of content I want to put out.
Yeah,
You know, even now I'm kind of, sometimes I'm like, how can I make this a bit more interesting to people, so that, or maybe provide a bit more quality. So it's just about trying to find your voice as a brand. Like you initially Mr. High Kick, so that explains itself, right? So
yeah,
you teach people how to kick people in the head.
yeah,
I remember you saying that to me. And then like every account needs to have this kind of direction.
yeah,
Is it going to be sports therapy? Is it going to be exercise therapy that you're going to be focusing on? I personally focus on manual therapy, so I show a lot of hands-on treatments,
mm-hmm.
exercise videos, different talks about anatomy, which are all things that I like. So essentially, I post content on things that I personally enjoy.
Yeah,
If I don't really enjoy something, I'm not going to post about it. Simple as that. And then when it comes to engagement, it's just about just kind of being patient. If you've got quality content, engagement will come. And obviously the more quality content you post, the more engagement you're going to get. So it will probably take months, even years, but
yeah,
people just need to persevere with social media, because it
that's
can
right.
be very shit sometimes and a
Yeah,
headache.
yeah. And like you say, I think finding your identity is really the key, because so obviously my account used to be Mr. High Kick because it came about, somebody in a forum said, if you want to learn how to kick high, speak to this guy. He's basically Mr. High Kick. And I thought, I like that name.
Yeah,
Obviously, I've had issues with my health and especially my hips over the years, where my ability to kick high myself has been quite patchy. And
yeah,
I'm in better health now, and I can still do the splits, but kicking high is still a bit of an issue. So I thought, well, what's my identity now?
yeah,
And I thought, well, I'm kind of the science guy when it comes to flexibility.
yeah,
What's my specialism? It's like, well, I like the research on flexibility research. Well, that's self-explanatory. And
exactly.
I know that since I've changed, and it was only a recent change, but since I've changed, and I was going over the notes from your seminar where I thought I had this brainstorming session. I thought I'm going to change the name of the account,
Yeah,
change it to flexibility research, and I just feel a lot more at ease and comfortable with the stuff that I'm putting out. And I suppose it takes pressure off myself as well, because the
yeah,
kicks will come back in time. But I don't feel like I have to be that person doing the kicks and
yeah,
and then feeling shit because factors outside of my control currently
yeah,
sometimes prevent me from doing that. But the research is, I could share that all day long. So
yeah. It makes sense. It
yeah,
makes sense
absolutely,
completely.
yeah. You're also doing great work coaching other therapists and trainers in terms of how to run an offline business as well. What do you think is one of the most common mistakes that health and fitness business owners are making, and maybe what steps they should take to rectify?
Um, Well, like first of all, the reason why I started doing the coaching in the first place was because I personally was looking for a coach like a couple of years ago, and then I actually had one, and I was paying 150 pounds an hour to meet this person
Mm-hmm.
because he had a successful business. He still has a successful business, which is a great business. But
Yeah,
what I found was that the ideas that he was giving me had nothing to do with my business.
yeah,
And then I kind of went online and started looking for other coaches. And then what I realized that a lot of these coaches were basically general business coaches. So there was nothing specific to our industry,
mm-hmm.
And I was thinking like, how can I, help other people in my situation, from a couple of years ago. So I just decided to do things a bit more specific to the industry. And
Yeah,
this is the first, like, this is how people should initially, if someone's struggling with their business, they need someone to help them who's actually been where they've been.
yeah,
When I say where they've been, if like it needs to be very very similar, like because our industry is completely different to like the investment industry or the real estate, whatever,
Yeah.
doesn't, if you've made like, a good business selling houses, it doesn't mean that you can be a successful therapist, it
Right.
doesn't translate. So
Yeah.
people need to find someone relatable to kind of keep them accounted for what they're doing. And that's my main kind of aim with my business, with the coaching business, so, and all my clients, they know this, that they've got goals to do every week. So they come to me every week, we meet, and I give them more homework. So I just keep them accountable for their business on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing you need to do as a business, just kind of put down some goals, maybe short-term and a long-term goal, and then just try and follow that as much as possible and find some help.
Yeah, that's great. So we've talked some quite heavy stuff, quite serious tone. So a bit more of a fun question now. If you were stranded on a desert island and you could only take one book, one piece of gym kit, and one type of food or drink, what would they be?
So when it comes to the book, I probably wouldn't take an actual physical book because I don't like reading them. I like listening to them.
Okay.
I've never had the attention span to read books. I really enjoy listening to them.
Yeah.
So I'll probably take like, if I could take an audiobook, I would take, let me see. There was a book about, oh, can I quickly, no, what was it? It was about, it was about showing people how good you are through action rather than talking and stuff. You've probably heard about it. It's quite an interesting book.
Try to remember the name.
Be so good they can't ignore you. That's what it's called.
Okay.
Heard of it?
I've heard of it. Yeah, I don't think I've read it though.
So when I listened to that book, it was basically saying something that I already knew, and it was saying something that I already had come to after thinking, like, and brainstorming in my life and stuff. And it was talking about the fact that there's no point in like changing your career from today to tomorrow without having a plan and stuff. Because a lot of people say that. A lot of people say like, if you want to do something, you should leave your job today if you're an accountant and then go and do like a yoga course and be a yoga teacher. And that's not how things work. There needs to be a transitional period from where people actually start living their dream until they reach it. So that's what it was talking about. Yeah. The reason why I will probably take this book is just because it reminds me what I have to do, to get where I want to get. So it's a really good book. It's really easy to listen to as well because it's kind of philosophical. So you guys should listen to it or read it as well. I probably wouldn't take any gym kits because if I'm on an island, all I need is my body. When I go on holiday, especially a beach holiday, that's where I actually train my hardest.
Okay.
People are kind of resting on the beach. I'm like jumping over their kids,
running, tackling them out the way. Get out of the way.
That's me, like I remember like a couple of years ago I was on the beach and there were a couple of like elderly people walking on the beach, so I had to kind of slalom in between them all and stuff and jumping over kids, and I love that stuff,
Yeah.
So I love training on the beach, so I don't need any equipment.
Yeah.
You can do anything on the beach.
Should release a new exercise program, how to terrorize pensioners on the beach,
how to close down the beach, in a day. That was me. People are looking at me like I was crazy, trust me, but anyway,
if it works,
it's good stuff.
Yeah.
And then all you probably need is like coconut water.
Yeah.
If you're at the beach, gives you everything you need.
Fair enough. Well, that's it for my questions. But before we finish, can you just tell the audience where they can find you on social media or website?
So my social media Instagram profile is at Brad_Georgiev. My Facebook page is called the Omnibody Clinic or at Omnibody Academy. The website is also Omnibody Academy, where I'm currently designing some online courses where people can kind of learn how to fix their own pain by doing certain self-treatment techniques and corrective exercise. I've got more websites coming in soon. I'm just kind of developing them as well, but those are my main channels.
Brilliant. Well, Brad, you've given some fantastic answers. It's always a pleasure talking to you. So again, thank you for your time and all the best, mate. I'll chat to you again soon.
Yeah, I'll see you soon. Thanks for that.
All right. See you later.
Bye-bye.